We're gonna come down, come in. Maybe we need to come in a little closer.
If you're sitting in the flag seat from the outside, you can't see anything. Yeah, flag seat from the outside.
Can you hear me, Professor? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
You say you can hear me? All right, excellent.
Professor Griff, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. How y'all doing?
All right, can you tell us where you're coming from, live from? Where are you at?
I'm in a place called the Deck. I'm not sure if people are familiar with that. Decatur, Georgia. Yeah.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back. I'm ad hoc MC for the evening. Thank y'all for being with me. Let me introduce our moderator. He will introduce the panelists. So I'm going to get right into it. Mr. Johnny Finn. He is joining us today to moderate this panel discussion on myths and miseducation. All right, now this man is the father of five. He's a long-term collaborator with the Griff Public Library, and he's a community leader, counselor, and mentor. Above all, he is a dear friend of mine. And before anything else, I want to make sure that you all know his book is in our library system. It's called Sugar Boy. It is an autobiography of his life and his journey into manhood. So, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mr. Johnny Dent.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the People's University. Tonight, we are going to have some heavy hitters. Unfortunately, we don't have all the time in the world to do the things we need to do in the world. But being mindful of the time and the interest of the time, we're going to go to about 8:15 this evening with our three distinguished guests, as I moderate the panel. And probably around 8:15, we'll open it up for questions and answers. Is that good? All right. Tonight, we engage in an important panel discussion around historical myths and miseducation as they relate to African Americans in the United States. We situate this discussion within the context of the father of Black History Month, Carter G. Woodson's The Miseducation of the Negro, which reveals that the many achievements and contributions of the people of African descent were overlooked, ignored, and even suppressed by the writers of history textbooks and the teachers who use them. We are pleased to have on our Myths and Miseducation panel Dr. Michael R. Williams, professor in the School of Social Work and director of Black Studies program at Cleveland State University, and also the moderator and discussion list for Images, which comes on 14 nights. Dr. Michael Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Dent.
Also, along with Dr. Michael Williams, we have Dr. Padmore Akbar Mamiisi, who is a scholar, a poet, and professor of African American Studies at Cuyahoga County Community College. Dr. Akbar Mamiisi. And last, certainly, but not least, joining us from Decatur, Georgia, or the deck as he called it, is a legendary hip-hop artist and author, Professor Griff of the renowned hip-hop group Public Enemy. Welcome, Professor. Gentlemen, I'll get right to it. First of all, beginning with Dr. Williams, why African American history or Black history?
Now, that's a question that I get asked daily at the plantation of CSU. Students will come in and say, why do we need to take Black Studies? And I answer it by saying, you come to this university for 4, 5, 6 years, and you take white study courses, and you never ask the question, why are you taking white study courses? So you get a degree in white studies. And then you come out of the university and you know nothing about yourself and nothing about how you would fit in the context. So when I understand that our students have been miseducated from the standpoint to even ask that question, why do you want to learn about yourself? It shows you to the extent that one has been miseducated. The other part I have to my students, I always tell them, how do you say you can have a proper education if you don't know the full story? You cannot know half the story or a third of the story and say that's the full story. So it's very important that we have students that's educated with Black history, Black studies, all those types of things, because it becomes very important for us to understand who we are. We can't talk about who we are by making up things. We have to actually sit down and study things.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Dr. Akbar Mamiisi.
Yeah, I always maintain that unless the antelope learns to write its own history, the hunter will always write the history in his favor. Every now and then on graduation days, I see we black people wearing the stole. But our Africanness is not in that story. It is something within us. And we need to have knowledge about who we are. Every now and then I hear students telling me, we are sons and daughters of queens and kings. But when you ask them which of the kings and queens you are, they do not know. So, who are you? This is where it is important that we begin to learn our own history, write our own historical books, so that we can tell our own story, without which nobody will hear us or know who we are.
Thank you, Dr. Professor Griff, I see you shuffling. You have a comment. Why Black History Month? Why any of this?
Well, I'm glad you phrased it that way instead of the other way I heard it. This whole idea of African American. That's probably another lecture that we need to have, just to clarify that confusion. Black is the essence of everything in existence, and every people come from black people. Recently, Tariq Nasheed covered that in three of his documentaries, Hidden Colors. Before that, Eugene Adams covered that in Africans in Asia. And I have a book sitting in front of me, The Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization by Anthony T. Browder, and many other scholars and researchers have covered that. And the whole idea of us being in Black History Month and not celebrating our blackness, whether we're on the campus or off the campus, online or offline, I think is we do ourselves a disservice. It was the most honorable Elijah Muhammad that said, and popularized by Malcolm, he said, out of all our studies, history is best qualified to reward all of our research. When we know what was, we can better understand what is, so we can prepare for the future. So I believe and know and understand that Carter G. Woodson was right on point with when he gave us Negro History Week, but no one understands that Carter G. Woodson was looking way beyond a Negro and a week. You understand? We need to understand that particular dynamic. And I agree with the two other gentlemen that are on the panel. Our story needs to be told to us, by us. So as one of the Public Enemy songs say, Dr. Khalid Abdul Muhammad says, have you forgotten that once we were brought here, we were robbed of our names, robbed of our language. We lost our religion, our culture, our God, and many of us, by the way we act, we even lost our minds.
Little shameless plug there, Professor Griff. Dr. Akbar Mami said, what is the role of African American history in the context of mis and miseducation?
In the first place, let me put a human face on the concept of myth and miseducation. The word miseducation was first coined in 1790 by Douglas Harper. And his idea is to mislead and misinform the public mind in order to keep them ignorant. And so we realize that when you get into our classrooms from kindergarten to primary school to middle school, and even you come to the universities, the textbooks are full of Eurocentric ideas. We have no knowledge about the history of we Africans. Now, the history of African Americans even did not start in slavery. It starts long before slavery. Unfortunately, that aspect has been cut off in order to make us ignorant about who we are, and so to redefine us. You see, the point we must understand is that to define a word is to limit the function of that word. And so the more we are kept in the dark, ignorant, the more will be exploited, will be used and underused and abused. That is where we have the need for us to observe and take time to observe this period and know who we are.
Thank you. Professor Griff, followed by Dr. Williams. What is the role of African American history in the context of myths and miseducation?
When we talk about the idea of a role, it reminds me of this idea that I keep hearing over and over and regurgitated over and over again. You see, when we talk about the role, this idea of a role model. So when you play this particular role in the lives, in the collective lives of a people kidnapped and brought to America, and then this country and this educational system is left with the duty and responsibility of educating 30 to 60 million of us. That is an awesome task. When we only pull from the history that they allow us to study, simply because everyone in the audience needs to know and understand we cannot continue year after year to study black history or African American history and the role that it plays, starting with slavery. We have to go way beyond slavery and then bring it up to date and put things in its proper context. So we have to study the history and the herstory from our perspective, and only from our perspective, because the best person that I'm the best person that could be Professor Griff. So when we tell our story, it has to be told from our perspective. The primary role in education, the term education comes from the Latin root educare, meaning to draw out of. So education is not something that you put in the student or in the human being. Everyone sitting in this audience, the Creator has deposited everything that you need that for you to ultimately be yourself. The educational system should be designed to pull the best out of the human. And then like minds can come together to carve out the role that that particular education should play in the lives of our people moving forward.
All right, Professor Griff. Dr. Williams.
I put it in a slightly different context. I think about the story of how a cat was raised, or a kitten was raised with a group of puppies. And the puppies kept telling the cat that he was a puppy. And pretty soon, the cat started to believe that they were a puppy. And he grew up and started barking and acting like dogs. And in fact, the cat became a chaser of the dogs and turned into dogs and killed a lot of the dogs. Then it happened one day that he ran into another cat. And then the cat began to educate the kitten, or the cat, the new cat, that you're a cat, you're not a dog. And part of what this is important to understand when I'm saying this, that African American history becomes a true symbol of what we've been forced to learn. That you learn a different history. You learn what you were not told. And for me, knowledge is power. That you begin to change your identity. You learn that you're not a cat. You know, you're not a dog. You're a cat. And being proud of being that cat. And doing what cats do. But you ever notice some of us as African Americans try to be something we weren't designed to be? And we tried to fit in circles where we weren't designed to fit in. And we try to accept somebody else's reality that is now our nightmare. You know, in terms of what's really going on. And yet we begin to try to prove to somebody that we're human too. And how do you prove that you're human to someone when they have no vested interest in accepting you being human? So why are we doing that? Okay, because we think if we talk correctly, we walk correctly, we live in certain neighborhoods correctly, that all of a sudden we're going to be accepted. And then we never ask the question, accepted by whom and by who? My employer, CSU, I had a meeting with one of the deans the other day, We had this discussion, and I asked the dean, I said, you know what? Because we're having a heated discussion, and I said, what do you see when you see me? And he says, I see a man. I said, what do you really see? What do you see? And then I told him, I said, no, one thing I hope you see, that I am not a dark-skinned white person. I'm a black man who reserves the right to see the world through my lenses. You cannot correct what I see because you do not see what I see. So when you tell me how far we've come, you have not walked my journey. Okay, only we have walked that journey. So when you move your foot from my neck to my back, and you say that's progress, okay, that's not progress. I want you off me, period. And that's what African American history does, a correct interpretation. It removes that foot. And it puts things in a proper context for us to understand who we are. Because before we understand who we are, we got to understand people have vested interests in keeping you to understand what they want you to understand. And women sometimes go through the same type of thing. That men sometimes will tell women what they are, as opposed to women saying who they are. Same type of scenario. So again, I look at our history as being that elixir, being that antidote of what we regurgitate and what we experience on a day-to-day basis. Because sometimes the final comment I can take my glasses off and give it to this couple right here, and they're not going to see the world clearly at all. Because you take these glasses and put them on, I guarantee you're going to stumble. But here we are for 300 years walking around with somebody else's glasses looking at the world. We have to put our own lenses. And then we see things clearly and reject the fact that we have to accept other people's glasses in order to accept their vision. And that's the importance that I see of what's going on with our history and why it's so important. And as Malcolm once said, the history is the collective memory of a people. Without a history, you're relegated to the lower animals. And history is very important.
Yeah. Dr. Williams says something which actually invokes something inside me. Since part of last year, August, I've been going around the United States giving lectures on Harper Lee's 2 books, To Kill a Mockingbird, and the new book she wrote, Go Set a Watchman. People think that Go Set a Watchman is a sequel to the original book, To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a lie. Originally, she wrote that book, Go Set a Watchman, as the original book she decided to publish. But the publisher objected to it because it was following the truth, which we call verisimilitude, from the third point of view. And so it was objected, censorship objected. And they asked her to rewrite the story from the point of view of a child. And that is why Atticus was glorified. And so we saw the Salvation Army of a certain race of people towards the black people. But at the end of her life, she realized, no, she has not told the truth about the history of the people she was writing about. And so she released that book, Go Set a Watchman. Now, the title of that book comes from Isaiah chapter 4, verse 6, where God asks the prophet to go and set a watchman and see for his own self the truth and tell the people. And that is why that book came out. You realize immediately that because it did not glorify a group of people who were originally glorified in To Kill a Mockingbird, people hated that book. Because it did not make the money that they were looking for. And that is what we experience when we do not write our own history. That is what we experience when we don't learn our own story. That is what we experience when we, black children, refuse to learn books written by Africans or African Americans. So it is important that we begin to take books that are written by our own people, read them, digest them. Other than that, we'll have a problem. Because it is easier to build strong children, but it is difficult to repair broken men.
Excellent comment, Dr. Akbar. Professor Griff, this is how we doing in Cleveland. He talked about education. Look at it. Listen, I'm going to give a statement, and then I want you to expound on the statement, followed by Dr. Williams and then Dr. Akbar. Education under outside control or education under outside influence.
You really want me to respond to that? Like, really?
Gingerly, professionally, intellectually.
Okay, let me do it your way. I'm sitting in front of a book, which my third time reading it. It's called Black Out Through Whitewash by Dr. Suzar. Probably about 300 pages or so. And it goes through not the entire history, but it goes through aspects of our history that are not even mentioned in the history books. That these other people have taken aspects of our history and have rewritten it. Why did they do that? So then when we do go back to study to uncover these particular hidden gems and treasures, once we find them, we won't bump into ourselves. In the book, the doctor says, and it's a woman, by the way, a black woman, she says, I was in search of God and I ran into myself. Ever since then, I said, people ask me, well, how do you want to be introduced? And I say, God, having a human experience called Griff. Because everything that's divine in nature is within inside of me. So then when I go back to search for these things, I go back and look for the thing that I connect with on a soul level. I want to ask everyone in the audience, do you have a purpose for your life? Do you have a mission statement? Don't look at the person next to you. All right? Don't look at the big guy on the screen. Look at you. If you have a purpose in your life, we need to search the self. Let me give you my purpose, and then I'm going to continue answering your question, sir. My purpose is this, and I say this every morning that I get up. I'm a soul in search of souls that are like minds, like mine. Marinate on that for a minute. I'm a soul in search of souls that are like minds, like mine. So when I get out, I got to get up in the morning. I got to recognize my black reference point. Are you following me? So when I run into books like this, I know how to deal with them. This says too much schooling, too little education. A paradox of black life in white society. Now this is very critical simply because we have other people, as the good doctor there said, documenting our history. During Black History Month, we often get shoved down our throats the same few historical figures, the same couple of incidents, and we get sick and tired of that, and we say, yeah, okay, we regurgitate it back to pass the course to get the grade. Fine. I also have to prepare myself for this. The White Architects of Black Education, Ideology of Power in America, 1865 to 1954 by Dr. Watkins. If white architects are shaping and molding black education from which we have to draw from, we're having other people tell our story and actually defining who we are. Not only today, but when we go back and pull from yesterday, as the Sankofa bird teaches us. And when you look at the symbol, the Sankofa bird is standing in the present, moving forward, but always having to go fetch it. But when we go fetch it, we run into this. And then we have to decode this madness. One more book. Two more, I'm sorry. Racism in the Academic Marketplace. Now listen, when I have to prepare myself to deal with this madness before I even can make my way through back to myself, It's like, wow, this is a task in and of itself. And this is the information that they make readily available for us to study about ourselves. I didn't even get to the internet yet. One more book. While I'm doing that, having to converse with my comrades, with people in my peer group, other educators, other hip-hop artists and whatever, I run into a lot of certified Uncle Toms. So I had to look them up in this book, The American Directory of Certified Uncle Toms. And there are a lot of them. I'm not going to mention and start out with the Bill Cosbys of the world. I'm not going to talk about... Oh, did I say something wrong? No, okay, cool. I heard somebody thinking and shit, moving around in their seat. I'm not going to talk about the Charles Barkleys of the world. God forbid Stacey Dash and herself. This kind of stuff is insulting and embarrassing to those of us that know and understand our black selves. Some of us just found out that we were black in Black History Month. That's a damn shame. Oh, excuse me. That's a shame. Excuse me, little one in the front row. I'm sorry about that. Anyway, I'm just saying this is a real dynamic. Last point. Dr. John Henry Clark said history is a clock that people use to tell their political time of day. It is also a compass that people use to find themselves on the map of human geography. History tells the people where they've been and where they have been and where they need to go. It also tells the people where they are in the world. Frantz Fanon said to ask ourselves 3 questions, and I'll end on this. Who are we? Where are we? And are we all that we ought to be in this world? We need to figure these things out and answer these questions for our individual and our collective self. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Griff.
Was that light enough for you? Was that light enough for you?
That was interesting.
Oh.
Dr. Williams, education under outside influence or control.
I don't know what to say after these 2 gentlemen say pants. But I will say that when you talk about education and outside control, we have to start to understand what that truly means. When somebody has control over how they educate you always got to ask yourself, in whose interests are they educating? Whose best interests are you doing? I'll give you an example. We send our kids every day, and I'll pick on any school system, clean public school system. We send 80,000 kids to school, and we get 50% dropout rate. Now, think about if this was Beechwood. Think about if this was Orange. Think about if this was Shaker. There would be protests all up and down the street because those people are not having 50% of their kids drop out, and the people who graduate can't pass proficiency tests. This is a form of collective genocide. Because these children, which are children, can't compete in a global society and be educated properly, then how are they ever going to be soldiers in the war that we need to deal with? But we can't send our kids to schools and expect others to educate them. And when we do send them to schools, we're not there to support our kids in that process. And so when I look at who has control, there was a book, Professor Griff was talking about it. There was a book that was just recently published. And Texas is a place in the country where they decide what is in school books.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think you all saw that, where they described slavery less than 2 sentences and misdescribed and misunderstood that whole process. And talking about the slaves volunteering. Now, I looked through my history book, and I don't see one single volunteer that got on those boats volunteering. Now, I don't know where they did their research. But had that sister had not stood up and said no, we'd have had a whole other generation. I'll tell you a sad story about miseducation. I had a young African-American student say this 3 weeks ago, I think it was. He said, Dr. Williams, Martin Luther King was a great man, and he freed a lot of slaves. And I looked at him like,
You started something in Georgia, just so you know.
okay, can you repeat what you just said? I thought I had misheard. Martin Luther, he said it probably. Martin Luther King was a great man. He had a dream. He freed a lot of slaves. Okay, what school did you go to? And he got an A on his history test. See, if we're allowing our children to be miseducated, we're sowing the seeds of our own destruction.
That's right.
In terms of, and we have kids that we send them to schools and they come back and we don't understand who they are. I had to deal with this with my own child. I'm the director of Black Studies, and she comes back spouting off some stuff. Where'd you get that? My teacher told me. I had to go up to Heights High and have a conversation with her teacher about what is really going on and what she's miseducating my child. If I don't care enough about my own child, I'll be damned if somebody else don't care enough about it. And we have to understand this. And I tell our students all the time, we're in a war. And that war is to control our minds. And our disks or our hard drives need to be wired. You have to be careful how your hard drive is wired because the programs you put in there start acting real funny. And you get a Stacey Dash. and we laugh at Stacey, but some of us aren't too far from Stacey. Why do we have to have Black History Month? I'm not African. Where you from? I'm from Georgia. I'm from Alabama. Where you from? I'm from Mississippi. I'm not African. Our hard drives being rewired. And so we have to begin to understand who's controlling our education. And I don't care whether that's in the church house or the schoolhouse. We have to make sure that we understand what is being served and we're eating. And that pretty soon, we're going to start mimicking things that we learn in terms of where we're at. And so, again, we have to gain control. So when I look at like in Cleveland, for example, in Youngstown, for example, where school systems have been taken over by the state, and the citizens have no vote, no direct vote on what's going on, how do you control the kids' education? Who makes those decisions? And at the end of the day, our kids in the inner city are learning very little. And the kids in Beachwood, Shaker, Orange, they're learning how to deal with the stock market. They're learning how to deal with the internet. They're learning how to deal with all those other types of things. And then we punish our kids and say they can't compete. And we blame the victim. Well, we have made them victims in our own self. And so then they go into the prison industrial complex. So we have to be very careful about our education. There has to be a purposeful thing in terms of education and take responsibility. This little one that's sitting up front. It is our job to prepare this child to understand the world in which she's going to live in. We have to turn off some of the reality TV and get into the reality of life and what's really going on so that she has a better world and that she understands what's going on. So again, I think it's very important. If education is not in your control, then you better ask whose control is in and who's making those decisions. And is that person operating in your best interest? And nobody operates in your best interest like you should.
I thought about my visa.
I have 10,000 things to say.
You can do it in 2 minutes.
But there is something that I want to point out. If you allow somebody to determine the diameter of your thought or your thinking, that person in the end will determine the circumference of your actions. It happened that I was a supervisor of students who wanted to become teachers in one of the universities. I will not mention the university. So my students went out on teaching practice, and I followed them. That day was the multicultural teaching day. And you know, multicultural, they teach different literary texts from every corner. And that day, the student prepared to teach Eliado Equiano's Slave Narrative, chapter 1. Then the teacher who is the mentor, decided to introduce the text. I was sitting at the back, and the teacher said, Eliado Equiano was such a fortunate young man who was brought from Africa to America, and it happened that in the course of his life, he met a white woman in Britain whom he married, and she helped him to write the narrative. I was boiling inside me. I stood up, went to the front, held the arm of my student, packed all her books, and said, let's walk out. Because that was poisoning the mind of that child. Because the teacher was miseducating a future teacher. She is a black lady who is going to teach my black children in a school. And is that what she is expected to go explain? No. That was not what Eliado Equiano experienced. Eliado Equiano is the first person to have documented what happened in the Middle Passage. He's the first person to have given us a geographical account of what Africa is about in his text. So I got angry. Now there is a book that I just bought. The title is The Lies That My Teacher Told Me. When I was reading that book, and it's written by a black person, something that I did not know, I knew some of the things, but some of the things I did not know, was Christopher Columbus never had a picture taken of him when he was alive. And so, after his death, they have to draw him in different positions. And so, if you pay attention, in different books, you see a different face, a different personality of what? Christopher Columbus. And so, for that matter, my brothers and sisters, if you ask somebody to educate your child, what do you think that individual is going to feed the brain of that child? You must understand that your history is your path on the map of human geography. And if you miss that path, you will never get to the destination on the map of human geography.
Now listen, this next question is probably going to have each of y'all on a behavioral contract. Be nice. I'm going to mention it, Professor Griff, followed by Dr. Williams, and then Dr. Agba, my PhD. Political education and neglect. And we talking about not just from the United States view as far as Republican, Democrat, but we talking about a worldwide view. And I heard you earlier mention Francis Hispanic. So behave, Professor, nice as you can. I don't know, just do what you do.
Well, we have to understand politics. And politics is the science of governing people. And if we're going to politicize the whole idea of education, then I think we need to be concerned about the other 8 areas of people activity that Dr. Frances Cress Welsing gave us in her book, The ISIS Papers. And we have to do that simply because when you talk about the science of governing people under the realm of education, it becomes very dangerous because we know and understand by looking at those that are running for the highest office in the land, both on the Democratic and the Republican side. I call them Republicrats. All of them run by the same people and controlled by the same people. Let me stop this for a second. Let me divert. Black people, please listen to what I'm about to say. If Donald Trump becomes president, I don't want to hear nothing from you on that long boat ride back to Africa, okay? Now let me finish. Now let me finish. I don't want to hear nothing from nobody. I know that's a double negative, but I don't want to hear anything. It is ridiculous. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. But education being politicized to what end? Colin Powell has higher education. If you can remember Colin Powell, right? What did his education demand him to do? Drop bombs on our people in foreign countries. Kind of Lisa Rice had an education on a hot. That was a Freudian slip. Trust me, it was. All right, come on, bear with me. I'm an MC, okay? Just bear with me for a second. Condoleezza Rice had a higher education. But what did her education demand from her handlers and her slave masters' children? It demanded something very different from her. And I could go on and a long list of people and what their education demanded from them. Simply because they didn't understand that their education that they're receiving from their slave masters' children was used in a political arena to not further their cause and their people, but to further someone else's agenda, be it foreign or domestic, and we need to understand that. So, yet again, back to what our good sister, now our ancestor, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, has taught us, that racism, white supremacy, is a local and global power system. And we have to understand that it's a system, whether consciously or subconsciously determined by the vast majority of white people. I'm not talking about the ones that's in this audience or the one that you kind of work with or you friends with. Because subconsciously, they may not be aware. Because everything that speaks to their existence is all around them. Buildings are named after them, and streets and concepts and holidays, and everything speaks to their existence, and it speaks against yours. How political is that? So we have to understand this particular dynamic and start politicizing our education that we have to teach. Listen, I have 2 sons. When they were in school, I said, listen, I need you to go to school. I need you to act accordingly, and I need you to take 2 sets of notes. The one that the teacher give you, write that stuff down, memorize it, regurgitate it back, and get your grade. And the other set of notes I need you to take is the stuff that I need you to bring back to Dad so we can go over this. And so you can at least know and understand what's going on so you can get a real education. Well, make a long story short and a short story shorter. They did the first one, and I never got a chance to sit with them to unravel that madness because they got it through Professor Griff's, their dad's, life experience. And I think if we know and understand as parents and educators that are guiding young people, molding and shaping young people are watching us and how we're handling what's going on in America. They may not say anything. They may not be intellectual or bright enough to, and their filter may not be that sharp enough to understand what's going on in America in the political arena. It is up to us to filter this stuff down and educate our young people, especially that generation coming up back behind us. I'm talking about the Little Waynes, the Little Wendy's, and the rest of them. I'm talking about LL Cool J, who said he wants to forgive R.I.P. to Robert E. Lee. He want to thank Abraham Lincoln for freeing me. Now this is LL Cool J. Lil Wayne talking about he beat the P up like Emmett Till. See, when our young people look at some of these rap artists as icons, we have a serious problems because now they become the leaders. Anyway, thank you.
Mr. Griff. Dr. Williams, I saw you warm your hands and this was our campfire. Let's go.
And that was a hot presentation was just here. So I was warm. I was feeling pretty good.
Political education and black.
I'll get to it. Okay. For me, everything is good. And we have to understand what that's all about. I give examples. I'll use the NRA, for example. Remember back when when the Black Panthers had guns and they went to the State House and they confronted the people at the State House about the guns? The NRA was silent on coming out and supporting the Black Panthers, their right to the Second Amendment. Right? They were silent. In fact, they're so silent, they still haven't said anything about them. Still waiting for their work. But then, when they got guns, then everybody has Second Amendment rights. See, the politics of that was not that they were against people having guns. They were against black folks having guns and pointing them at people who didn't look like them. Politics and understanding what goes on. And so if we have to educate our kids, and it's all about politics, it's all about looking out, and I keep saying it's about what is in your best interest. So when a politician comes to me, I don't care who he is or who she is, I ask, so how does what you want to do serve my best interest in my community's best interest? How do I do? Just because a politician looks like you doesn't mean they're serving your best interest. We got lots of those examples, right? We see Clarence Thomas, right? Kind of look like us. And what I found interesting about Clarence Thomas was he got an award. You might have seen this. He was at a dinner. He was the only black person for miles at this dinner. I mean, there was like 800 people, 900 people in this room. Even the waiters were white. And he was getting an award. And nothing rang in his head to say, this is kind of strange. I'm getting an award for all these people who don't look like me for what I'm doing. But he stood up and applauded while he's doing damage to generations of white people. And yet, we're not out there protesting the appointment of Clarence Thomas like we protest Black Lives Matter. Okay? Politics. Education. We sit in a medical map. Cleveland, Ohio. Cleveland Clinic. University Hospital. Metro. But we have an infant mortality rate, black infant mortality rate greater than many third world countries. Our children are dying faster. Can't get medical. We're closing trauma units in neighborhoods that need more trauma units. Politics. And so it becomes very important for us to understand, because this is the politics of sacrifice. We're willing to sacrifice your kids to take care of ours. And so we're willing to sacrifice some of our own so it looks like we're being fair. These are politics. Class politics. Middle class people, there's a book by Harry Ashmore, and I'll close on this. The politics of race is so interesting. He said, the reason why racism works so well is because the rich white man convinced the poor white man that their interest was the same in keeping black people down. So the poor white man got to be called white, and the rich white man got all the money. And we look at it now. So we have poor white people living in trailer parks and think they're better than black people out there working every day. They don't realize that the one thing, and one white guy said, I'm better than you because I'm white. But you're poor. You're struggling. How are you better? But that's the delusion. And so, again, politics is very important. We have to educate our kids to understand that everything we do has a political agenda to it. And we have to understand how to promote our best interests. And what is true, and be unapologetic about promoting our best interests, because everybody else is promoting their best interests. I found, in the last comment, I saw something that I really pained me when I saw black women for Trump. Okay. And I'm looking at this like, really? What do you his immigration plan? Where do you think you fit on all the things that he's talking about? And look at the people who are supporting him, from the Klan all the way down to the skinheads and all that. Where do you fit in that bill? And so what you're doing is promoting a man to become president who, by the things he says, we fall to the logical conclusion, doesn't include you. Understand politics. I'm not saying any one candidate is better than another, but we need to analyze it before we vote, because we have to live with it. And I'm like a lot of people, if you don't vote and you don't analyze what you do, I don't want to hear what you got to say at the end of the day. Because if you didn't vote, then you voted for a loser. I mean, you voted for a winner. And so we have to get politically active. Politics, if we want to change what's happening with police and what's going on here, we got to get active and get on juries and become foremen of juries, change the legal system, become prosecutors. Prosecutors with an agenda to understand that we're going to be fair in what we do, but we're going to promote the law in terms of. And the final observation I have about politics is that I watched how politics has been used by our society to justify whatever white supremacists wanted to do. When we were in slavery and we ran away, they made it a law. We couldn't run away; it was a crime. We can't even run away from home slavery without getting a felony. Okay, think about that. And so when we said that we want equal equality, they put Plessy versus Ferguson in and say it's okay to be separate but equal. So every term they use the law, politics of the law, to try to do what they do. And even now, we're dealing with the whole concept of I was afraid for my life. And I have yet to find anybody who defines for me what that means. So if you don't know what that means, anybody can say that. I'm not saying they're not good officers. There's a lot of good officers. But at the same time, there's just like any other profession, there's officers that abuse that privilege also. So if an officer can say, I'm afraid for my life, what does that officer think when he rolls up behind me and flashes the light? I'm afraid for my life too. But I can't use that as a reason, but he can. And so we have to understand the politics and the neglect that takes place as a result of it. We don't have inner cities by accident.
Dr. Akbar, not the East.
Yes. Political education actually explains to us where we are coming from. It embraces our socio-economic and political struggle. To neglect political education is to give to the people an interesting story, sugar-coated story. Many of my students who do not study the politics of their existence or ancestors believed it was all rosy. The journey of the African American from slavery up to today was rosy. They have forgotten the struggles they went through because of lack of what? Political education. What has happened in our society today is once they take out political education, religion became the opium of society. When you listen to majority of people, they look at Africa and think it is a town. Meanwhile, all the continents of this world can fit into Africa and there will still be what? Space. In the textbooks that are written and taught in the school systems, not only in America, but also in Africa, refers to the slave dungeons or the slave castles as trading posts. And because of that, the African child in a high school, even to the university, does not understand slavery because it has been taken out of the textbooks. Now, students come to me and tell me, I'm doing culinary arts. I want to own my own restaurant. Everybody is telling me that. And I ask them, how many people from 1995 to today owns their own restaurants? Now, yesterday I got to know that the granting of loans for small-scale industries in Cleveland was jeopardized by racial discrimination. I'm not making it up.
Shocker.
It was on what? National Public Radio. And so they are working to fix that. Now, that tells me already the politics of what is happening with granting of loans by the banks to minority applicants. What the students do not know is that there is politics which they must know or be aware of when they are even studying a subject. Students telling me I'm doing engineering, and I ask them, have you studied the politics involved? Before a car is manufactured, a group of people have been targeted. How many of you have seen Rolls Royce on the streets of late? When the manufacturers saw black people selling drugs and making these, etc., what did they manufacture? The hammer. But when they realized that the hammer, people were no more buying it, they have stopped producing them on the mass scale. Because the politics involved in it. Oh Lord, my Savior. There are things I want to say, and if I say it, and I don't know what will happen.
Griff said it.
The thing I want, just let me remind everybody, is that there is politics in everyday activity, and you have to know it. The number of students who are admitted into colleges, there is politics involved in the admission. I did a research work on 3 universities in Ohio, Ohio. And I discovered that in one particular university, how many people or lecturers were promoted to the rank of professorship? How many of them were tenured? When I got into it, Native Americans, 0.0%. African Americans, 3.2%. Asian Americans, 4.6%. Caucasians, 88%. What does that tell you about the politics involved in promotion, tenure of even the teachers or professors in the various universities? When I wanted to publish that article, one of my professors, I was a student at that time when I was doing this, and my professor told me, don't add my name to it. They were afraid because they did not know how I was able to break into the database. So you see, there is politics in everyday activity. And you, as a student, must know the politics involved and work around it. Else, the politics will drown you in the quicksand of your existence.
Thank you, Doctor. Hold in the audience. We are out of time. Can we get like 5 more minutes?
Sorry
good,
to-
huh?
Sorry to
Where are you with us for 5 more minutes?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All right. So this is a combo question, starting with Dr. Akbar Abidse, Dr. Williams, and finally Professor Griff. And then after Professor Griff's comment, we'll open up the floor for 2 questions per panelist, and then we out of here. Good? So the next 10, 15, 20 years, what is the vision? What do we pass on to our children? And how did the previous generation miss the mark? Again, what's the vision? What do we want to pass on to our children? And how did the previous generations miss the mark?
That is a very difficult question. It's as simple as arithmetic, but as complex as geometry. I would like to leave the vision, to leave for my children the knowledge about the macro sociological analysis or interplay of race and class system in everyday life. Because wherever they go to, even in the kindergarten, when the kindergarten children were asked one day in America, what do you think about a black man? Each of the kindergarten children wrote rapist, armed robber, and you imagine the rest. So I would like we, the youth, to sit back and ask ourselves, who am I? What can I do to break the vicious cycle? The penumbra that engulfs us as a people. What can I do to break that cycle? So that even if I do not benefit from it, somebody will come to benefit someday. That is my dream. And that is what I would like to live.
Thank you. Dr. Williams, the vision.
I can't use big words like my colleague. I'm going down to a little bit more simplicity. I was deep. I was pulling out my dictionary to figure out what to say. I would like, well, my vision is that in the future, when a young child is faced with the dog test, to choose between the different dogs, that child can choose the dog that looks like them with no problem. At the same time, have the ability to accept other dogs. But understand their first choice is a dog that looks like them. See, in 1958, as you know, Kenneth Clark did the dog study. And our kids were picking white dogs over their black dogs. And you see the black dogs are ugly. 2010, we did the dog study all over again, and we're still picking white dogs. So I'm looking at a future in which we educate our children to love themselves, to embrace themselves, and not that they pick the dog that looks like them. And that you can go to these institutions and see people who look like us. Because it's hard to achieve things when you don't have role models of things that you see. And so, as the professor was indicating here, at Cleveland State University, where I am, I started here in 1985. There's 39 black professors there when I got there. Here it is 2016, there's only 34. Okay? And so when you begin to, and if you take out education, social work, black studies, 26 out of 34 is in those components. So you go through your whole education and not see one of us. So my vision is that we become much more visible and represent who we are, not what other people want us to be. My final observation is pay attention to what Cam Newton is saying. He's unapologetic about being a black quarterback. He's unapologetic about who he is and embracing who he is. And we need to embrace this young man because society is telling him how to respond after a loss. Who are we to tell this man how he should respond after he lost? And we have people saying he shouldn't have acted that way. How did he act? I listened to the questions, I listened to the comments, gave short answers, and he don't say. So a vision where Cam Newton is free to say what he wants to say, and we're free to say what we need to say. And then when people attack that, we all stand up and say, no, this is what we raised. And also be free to disagree with each other. That's my vision for what I want for my child, my grandchildren, and when I'm not here, is that little black dog, the little black girl right there, that she can see her beauty in that little black dog. Okay? That little black boy can see his beauty in that dog. And he knows he doesn't have to be a hip hop artist, or he doesn't have to be this, or he doesn't have to be that. He can be a doctor, lawyer, he can be an artist. He can be a hip hop artist with conscience. Making a positive contribution to our community. So that's my vision, that we all understand that we have a role to make this happen, because this is not going to change by magic. There is no cavalry coming to rescue us. We are the cavalry.
That's right.
Professor Griff, the vision.
Real quick, I think the vision, well, I know from the work that I've been doing over the last, 20 some odd, 30 years, collectively, I think our vision should be everything that our ancestors and those that have struggled to see us get to this point, they had a vision. I think we should stand on the shoulders of all of those ancestors that came before us and collectively bring that energy and those ideas and that spirit together. And let's implement those things that they gave us. There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. Marcus Garvey said it. Elijah Muhammad said it. All the beautiful women and the sisters that have sacrificed to see that we get to this point. And that's another thing. The next time we got to have some women on this panel to balance this thing out, man. You understand what I'm saying? It's called Ma'at, true balance. Thank you. It's a beautiful thing hearing these kind of concepts coming through the lens of a woman. You understand what I'm saying? It's Ma'at, truth, balance, justice, reciprocity, and order. Our ancestors speak to us from within us. And when that voice speaks to you from within and you keep ignoring it because you probably smoke too much weed or drink or too much food or hanging out or whatever, we have to start listening to those ancestral voices that are in us. The whole idea of what do we want to pass on to our children? We want to pass on a legacy of greatness. We want to pass on a culture, because what's built in the culture is your primary source of education. Culture defines how you relate to everything in nature and even God. Culture helps you define who your enemy is. So we have to understand that. Last but not least, how did we miss the mark? Let me say that by saying this. There's a difference between the elders and the olders. The elders among us need to start acting like elders and sit at the head of the village at the table so we can get divine counsel. Let me just read this last thing. In this book, The Sex Imperative by Amalamu Kebomani Barudi, A Tradition of Purpose in Order. We must look at the psychopathology of everyday life, and we must recognize we cannot have it both ways. We cannot talk about the people who have enslaved us, discriminate against us, who insult us, who do all manner of other things against us, and then use them as models of normality. And yet these people are held up as normal and are used as the standard against which we measure ourselves as a people. And we use them for models for us to determine the way we wish our children to behave. And this is ridiculous. Can you imagine taking your child to school every morning after feeding them Captain Crunch and Lucky Charms and Fruit Loops and whatnot, and you dropping them off at the enemy school to be educated? This is a shame. So in the good and the great words, and tearing the page out of the Ohio Players songbook, simply, the vision is, I want to be free. Plain and simple. I want to be free. Thank you.
Pastor Griff.
Thank you.
Anyone, stand up. Yes, sir.
This you and Dada radio show, like you still,
Oh, thank you.
But anyway, Flint, Michigan. I'm sure all three of y'all familiar with what's going on there. I looked at whether it's Tyrone City, whether it's Michael Ford, whether it's MSNBC, what all y'all, y'all get the answers on the situation there. Toxic water that was switched from Detroit fresh water from Lake Huron to toxic water, wastewater that had chemical oil and other, toxic waste in that water that they was letting out people drink, or people in Flint altogether drink. Thank you.
Good. What was the question?
The question is, what was their thoughts on it,
Anybody want to start?
That is $1 million question, and we only have time for a $10 answer, bro. For real. I mean, that's a lecture in and of itself. Well, I mean, I'm just gonna say this: it's a continuation of this chemical and biological warfare, and we have to look at it. I'm talking about everything from how the classrooms are designed, the paint that they use in the projects. It's a grand design, and we could speak for a few hours on that alone. But that's all I want to say about it right now.
Dr. Williams or Dr. Akbar?
Yeah, I'm sure you are all aware that Thomas Jefferson wrote a book titled The Virginia Text. And in that book, he said, a black person is not a human being, but a thing, THING, who has no right, no anything. And so with that concept, political thought, that is why you have no right to sue or to testify against the other race. And so somebody can decide to exterminate you by using biological warfare. Now, Flint is not the first group of people that suffered. Have you forgotten the Tuskegee issue, the syphilis? Have you forgotten the Native Americans, the smallpox, blankets? Have you forgotten the other ones outside? So you must educate yourself. What is going on? We just had Ebola. Then a few years ago, we had HIV, which everybody knew was manufactured in a laboratory. I don't have to go on too much.
Oh, excuse me. Can I say one thing?
Sure.
I'm sorry about that. To that brother's question, let me just drop something in. There's a movie that was out called 3 the Hard Way. I don't know if you remember. If you're my age, you probably remember it. I'm 55. There was a movie called 3 the Hard Way, and it played out that very same scenario. It's called 3 the Hard Way, where there was some people in government that poisoned the water system in the movie. So we have to understand that they're probably... There's these things that are out there, but they're just hidden in plain sight. And we have to be able to decode these things and understand them, that they are there. You understand what I'm saying? And like the good doctor just said, this is not the first time this has happened. So we have to go back and renew our history and know and understand that even these people that are left with the duty and responsibility of governing the people still cannot be trusted in 2016.
But have you forgotten something? The same thing was tried in Ohio. Have you forgotten about the egg farm that was throwing something into the water Do you remember?
Yeah, I remember, good doctor, because that was right after they was putting the chemicals in the batter in the chicken at the chicken joints. Hell, the Jerry curl was a damn chemical and biological warfare. Hell.
I just want to say something just very briefly. Remember Katrina?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I had the honor of taking students down after Katrina happened, and we were rebuilding playgrounds and right after building schools and doing those type of things. But one of the things I noticed, and I have in my office, now I've given some as collector items, 2 cases of water that the government was giving survivors of Katrina.
Mm.
This water was canned water in aluminum cans.
Wow.
Anybody in basic public health knows you do not put water in cans. And this water is called filtered water. And I have these cans in my office, and it was a constant reminder to me that even in the midst of these individuals' trials and tribulations, they were still given things that would harm. Okay? And so when I talk about the government, I always talk about government is not this entity that's unknown. There are people in the government who make decisions about certain types of things. Who's expendable, who's not expendable. And I think we have to be realistic. And you listen to, I forget the author's name, but I had a chance to meet her, Medical Apartheid. Get the book. Read the book, Ghetto Medicine. And find out it's not an accident that these things are happening and that people become experiments throughout this whole type of thing. Look what happened when we did with radiation treatment with children, with defective children, and thalidomide that was used to give to moms. This country has a history of having individuals in government positions that do that. Now, one final example. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri, in a hospital called Homer Phillips. I don't know if anybody is familiar with Homer Phillips Hospital. I recently found out that in the 50s, I was born in 1952. In the 50s, the doctors in this all-black hospital took babies from mothers, told the mothers that the babies were stillborn, and gave the children to other families.
Mm. Wow.
One lady just recently found out, she's 60 years old, just found out that she was one of those children given to another family.
Wow.
I had to joke with my mom. My mom's going through Alzheimer's right now. And I was just joking the other day. I said, Mom, you sure I wasn't given to the wrong family? She said, no, you legit. Okay. But think about what that means to tell a mother who's given birth to a child. Your child is born stillborn. You don't see your child. It is given to another person. See, we can't take anything for granted here in terms of what's going on. So what's happening in Flint is similar to what's happening in Cleveland with the lead poisoning that took place in the houses in Glenville. Where our children were 10 times more likely lead poisoning in those houses in Glenville. So this is not new. Because what we're viewed as an expendable population in terms of what's going on.
In the interest of time, one last question. Yes, sir.
I got like a statement or whatever, I hope or whatever, and a question as well. So maybe like 3 years, on and off, I've been living in Romania, and that's like in Eastern Europe. People don't know, and I didn't know until I went there. So I was living over there, and my girlfriend, she's Romanian. Her cousin just had a baby, I think 3 years old now. It's her niece. So she just sent me a picture a few days ago. Since y'all was talking about the white black baby test that came to my line, she just sent me like a week ago a picture of a black baby doll that her niece picked out when they went to the store. So on that side, things getting better because y'all was talking about the future and how that's what y'all want to see. So it's kind of slowly going better. With that being said, my question to everybody was, I'm like 31 now. And I grew up in a family where I got educated also outside of the school system. Probably not the best, but I did get a little bit. But I'm kind of tired at 31 of hearing, like, the stories and the history and everything like this, and I'm trying to like wonder where's the action happening. And so my question to you guys are: do you just feel like teachers, and you're just giving the knowledge for somebody to do something else, or do you guys have plans to have like black hospitals opened or coffee shops, you know, like anything like that? So that's my question to you guys.
Can I answer?
Somebody wanted to answer.
I see Griff, so go ahead.
Well, I don't know how old the gentleman is, but that's been my entire life since I was a teenager. I think you probably heard of this group called Public Enemy. I'm not sure, but that's that spirit in action, where you can physically see it. All the things that we have done, I have done before Public Enemy, and we have done collectively as Public Enemy, you probably didn't benefit from, simply because we did feed the homeless. We did go into the prisons everywhere we went on tour to go visit our people. We left money on the books for people that we didn't even know. Do you understand what I'm saying? So you're talking about putting a plan in action. I'm 55 years old, been doing it since I was a teenager, and the plan is still in action. I'm on my seventh book, second radio show that I'm building, and one of my ultimate goals is to write a homeschool curriculum. Simply because we have to have some kind of alternatives in reference to this quote unquote public school. So I'm not sure how old you are, but there are some physical things that are being done that can affect the lives of our people on an individual level and as a collective group. Last but not least, I need that gentleman to go to www.millennium5.com. I'm hooked up with a group of people in Brooklyn that's about to change the game in the music industry to empower the artists. Last but not least, go to www.likeminds, like mine. These are some of the things that we're physically doing so we can raise the conscious level of the human family. You understand what I'm saying? Because I think during Black History Month, especially during Black History Month, we're under the notion that white people can't be taught by black people. White people need to be taught also. Do you understand what I'm saying? And this is a very real dynamic. So these are just some of the things that I do on a daily and consistent basis. All right, thank you.
I think, in answer to this question, there's many different roles that people play in the revolution. And I think teachers, we like the architects in a lot of ways because we deal with lives. I was a practicing social worker before I came into teaching. I spent a lot of time in the community. I spent a lot of time in the community, building schools, doing those types of things. But then I also began to say, and I did a lot of individual counseling with people, working in prisons, working with vets, doing those types of things. And I came to a conclusion. I said, I can do this one by one, or I can get into the education game, and I can help educate hundreds of teachers, hundreds of social workers in that way. See, you have to look at what you're building. And so in the village, there's going to be somebody who's going to physically build a building. There's going to be other people who are going to be physically building minds and spirits and bodies. And so we have to look at what we're building. When I look at CSU, my job being at CSU is, and I stay there just for as long as I have, because my job is to keep Black studies open and access to our community. That's my job. Because I don't owe CSU anything. But I owe my community everything. And so when those kids can come there and get an education, and those kids can come there and fight through and have a Black professor they can sit down and talk to, not just me but others, about their issues in day to day. Those are the things. My last point when you said, it gave me a sort of sad twinge when you said, and I'm not picking on you because I hear it from other students, I'm tired of hearing those stories. Those are our stories. We have the greatest history in the history of the world. But because it's been misrepresented and miseducated, we don't want to embrace those stories. But if you look at those stories, those are the ways our ancestors are pointing the way out of what our situation is. When we look at Harriet Tubman and say, I freed 1,000 slaves, but I could have freed 1,000 more if they only knew they were slaves. See, that white child in Romania who picks that black dog is free to choose who she wants to choose. But that black child is forced to choose the one she's been educated to choose. There's a big difference. So we need to understand that we're in this war and we're all in this together. But please, my brother, embrace those stories. Because that's you. The minute you kick those stories to the curb, you kick yourself to the curb. It becomes very important. And I'm not picking on you. Okay, because it becomes very important. And I want you to listen. I love you. And I don't know you, but I love you because you and me.
Likewise.
Okay, so I just want to say that because again, I don't want us to labor under delusions. Because while you're in Romania doing your thing, and I told you to travel around the world to do that, but remember you're in Romania. Hey, that's right. And in a moment's turn, you will think you're down in Mississippi. There's a reality to that. Okay? And I've traveled the world, and things turn on a dime, so I just want you to be alert. You know, but when you call out, I'll come get you. I don't say, man, I'm tired of the story.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for Dr. Michael Williams, Dr. Paul Moore, Oxford University, and Professor Griff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, bro. Thank you. Thank you.